Hello,
Okay.
I'm bored now, aka Keith. This is Rachel McDonald. Hey, Rachel.
Hi.
How's it going?
Hi. Good,
Good.
good. How are you?
I'm not bad. I'm not bad, thanks. Thanks for joining me. And in case you guys missed our intro video, which we did last week, Rachel is going to be joining me for the foreseeable future for like horror movie reviews in general, particularly like franchise type movies and looking at particular franchise, some of the big ones, some of maybe the not so big ones, some horror related TV. So that sort of stuff. So we're kicking it off this week, and we're doing it with the Fear Street trilogy, which just finished. Well, yesterday the final
Yes.
film went up on Netflix, so all three movies are now on Netflix of this new trilogy. We're going to discuss all three on this video and sort of give our overall thoughts, what we think overall of the three movies, and what we think of the individual. So how it works as a trilogy, how well it works, and what we think of the three films. So Rachel, if you want to maybe set things up with the first film and a bit of the history, because I know you've read the book. So.
Yeah, of course. Well, thanks again for having me. It's awesome to be here. I love discussing anything horror is good. So the Fear Street books, if you were a kid in the 90s, you probably read Goosebumps by R.L. Stine, which was obviously a very popular horror tween series. Fear Street was kind of the teenage version of Goosebumps. So it was written for a slightly older audience, and it took place on the titular street, Fear Street, and followed the teenagers of Shadyside and all of the horrible things that would happen to them because this town was cursed. And so when I heard that they were doing a movie trilogy, I was beyond excited because it just seems like at the moment it's the time for kind of 80s and 90s nostalgia with Stranger Things and the most recent It movies being set in the 80s. And so I thought this was the perfect time for them to do something like that. And so when the trailer came out, I was massively excited. And then when the first movie came out, I was beyond thrilled. I thought it was such a great introduction. So a lot of people were a little bit turned off by how overtly 90s it was. But I think that really, for me personally, that worked really well because it brought back the nostalgia of the books. So I think anyone who really read the books, it's definitely a big nostalgia trip for them. There were lots of plot references, lots of character names. The main character, Dina, in the very beginning of the movie, they hold up a book, an actual Fear Street book called Wrong Number, and the main character of that is Dina. So the main character of the movie being called Dina. It's a very nice tie-in. But I know that you, Keith, were not thrilled with the first movie. I remember you gave it a slightly lower rating. So I'm
Lower
curious to
rating.
see what your issues were with the first film and
Yeah,
let's
I
see if
mean,
I can
obviously,
maybe
yeah,
debate
it's
those.
fresh for me. Obviously, I haven't read the book, so I think that that's maybe partly to do with our difference of opinion on the first film, anyway.
Mm,
Because I was going to ask you about how they worked it in, because I know there's like hundreds of these books, so I didn't
yes.
know if they just took the early books for this or if they kind of more random.
So I kind of explained this in my most recent review of 1978, in that the original Fear Street books, there were 51 of them, and they were like Goosebumps. So they were individual novels within kind of a serialized format. So every story was a different story, had different characters. You would sometimes have one or two characters from one story guest star in another story, but they didn't really lend themselves to an adaptation for a movie. So what they have done is within the Fear Street, there were little mini trilogies. There were the Fear Street sagas and the
Right.
Fear Street cheerleader trilogies, and they were a linear story. And it seems like this series has taken their story inspiration from those little mini series, which actually have a
Okay.
storyline and recurring characters. So Sarah Fear, for example, the witch, or well, not the witch. Spoilers, people. By the way,
Yeah,
there's going to be
well,
lots of
we'll get
spoilers in this
there.
video.
Yeah.
She was and she was a prominent character in the cheerleader trilogy. So
Okay.
in the first movie where Sam lands on her bones and disturbs her graves and becomes possessed, that's taken straight from a cheerleader trilogy. That is actually an event that happens in the first book of that trilogy. So there's a lot of inspiration, I think, from that. And then with the first movie, I think they kind of were trying to recreate the feel of the books rather than the actual story. So they wanted
Right.
to recreate the tone and the atmosphere. The characterization of the teenagers are very, very close to what the characterization was in the books. They really liked teenagers that were maybe not the most likable characters, but you still rooted for them because they had so much attitude. Like they just always refused to let the odds overtake them. So no matter how bad things were, the teenagers were always just like, screw this, we're not going to let the evil defeat us. So even if you didn't particularly like them, you still wanted them to win. And I got that feeling from the first movie. Like I didn't like all the characters, but I was still like rooting for them as they were going through everything. And that's kind of what you had when you read Fear Street books. You always wanted them to win, even if they were arsehole characters.
You get part of that, 90s nostalgia sent from the first scene because, it had a very Scream sort of vibe. And without really knowing these books and stuff and what they were going for, you automatically, if you're of a certain era, you automatically click then they're kind of doing a Scream prestige because even to the extent where I think obviously Maya Hawkes, who they set up as a potential final girl, and then of course kill her off, which in the back of my mind I sensed they were going to do that, but I think that's obviously deliberately referencing the first Scream movie and the opening, which is like iconic now.
I know. The Scream opening is one of my favorite horror openings ever.
Yeah,
it's such a great scene. And I really like that Fear Street kind of paid homage to that. I thought they did it really well in a way that you could tell it was an homage, but it didn't seem like a complete rip-off. Like you could just tell that they really loved Scream as a film and they wanted to pay tribute to it. So they wrote this opening scene and I thought it was great. The whole movie actually gave me vibes of like late 90s slashers, which is my favorite era of horror, is like post-Scream horror, so late 90s to early 2000s, because I have such a soft spot for slasher films. They're so much fun, and I thought this film just seemed to be having so much fun with its premise. And I don't know, I feel like horror recently is becoming very highbrow and almost pretentious even, which I understand to a certain extent, but I kind of miss the fun, like horror in the 90s was just fun.
With certain things, like they're trying too hard to be clever and, and maybe, sometimes someone who's quite arty and isn't a horror fan will come in from the outside and they'll just lose a sense of what horror is at its like, truest sort of form. So I think that's probably a fair point. Just to sum up my thoughts, I think it's an okay movie. I did enjoy that opening scene. I think the characters are pretty solid. I don't think they're the best things ever, but I think they're pretty good. I think Dina was quite likable.
Yeah.
She grew on me. I think at first I was finding her quite annoying and sort of whiny and I remember scenes where there was a lot of them shouting over each other, like her and is it Sam the girlfriend?
Yes, Sam's the girlfriend. Yeah.
I just thought some of those scenes at first were a bit in your face, but they did grow on me as characters, and I guess they did a little bit of a Stranger Things thing with the friend. Is it Katie? Kate?
The bread slicer chick.
Something beginning with K. So
the cheerleader, drug dealer.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, they sort of did a reversal of that character where at first they set her up to be like the more useless, unlikable one. Yeah. And she actually had a pretty decent arc where by the end of the film was quite heroic in a way. The characters were okay, not amazing, but they were solid enough, not a bad cast, and the kills were actually good. I think the kill, particularly the one at the end, it was Kate's kill,
the bread. Oh yes, that was. I was like, I knew these films are going to be R-rated, so I knew we were going to get some like really good kills, but I was actually really surprised by the level of violence that this film went to in some places. It was just some of those kills were just like, whoa. And I remember when they were talking about the previous Shady Side killers, like the ones that had been possessed before, and they were showing flashes of some of the kills, there was that little kid in the mask with the baseball bat, like beating another kid. And I was just like, whoa, where did that come from? That was, I mean, it was great, but it was so out of left field. I was like, wow. But the books, again, the books were like that. The books would kind of
Okay.
move along and they'd be very mildly scary and kind of have a creepy atmosphere. And then out of nowhere, they would have some horrific act of violence that was just like, whoa, like there was a character
Okay.
who got boiled alive in a locker room, stuff
Yeah.
like that. It would just come out of nowhere. So I thought the kills were really inventive and very cool. I thought the Shady Side Ghosts were spectacular. That Ruby Lane one with her singing just creeped the crap out of me. Every time I heard that song, it was like, oh no, she's coming.
I think, yeah, I think that's where I have to bow down to you, obviously coming from the books and that knowledge, because, I have heard that complaint about the first film that because there's very little of that sort of thing for most of the film, then it does feel a bit like it comes out of nowhere at the end there.
Mm.
But yeah, if that's true to the books, then I do kind of respect that. But
Yeah, no, it's very cool. But that scene with the bread slicer, I was first of all, I didn't want
yeah,
Kate to die because by that point in the film, I had become really attached to her. And I know it's a horror film and anyone can die, but sometimes there are films where your favorite character dies and you just wish that they'd survived. So when she went through that bread slicer, that was just like, whoa,
yeah,
she
that
did
was
not.
really
That was yeah,
visually, yeah,
that was.
and the
But
sound of it, and
yeah, I apparently the writer or the director had to have a big fight with the props people when they were trying to tell
right,
her this is not going to work, and so they got a watermelon and they tested it with the watermelon and it actually works. So she was like, "See, it's gonna." I'm
yeah,
like, I mean, I was thinking, I'm like, okay, human skull, watermelon, not exactly the same, but it's a horror film.
yeah, yeah, you can see,
I have to admit, there was one character that I really didn't like, and that was Simon, the weird stoner dude. He
yeah, I didn't really like him.
no, and I was waiting the whole movie for him to die. So when Kate died, I was like, oh, if she dies and he doesn't die, I'm going to be really pissed. But then he got the axe to the head, and I was actually just like, yes.
Yeah, there's some, there's some characters you're glad to see. They're not really.
Yes, definitely. So he was definitely one. So I found even though I liked the first one, I actually think it was the weakest of the three. I think the next two movies got better. In particular, and we can segue now into I thought 1978 was really, really good. I thought that one was just I thought it was better than the first installment. I really like the camp setting. Camp settings for horror films are always great. It's such a great setting. You can do so
Do,
much with
do you
that sort of
just want to
setting.
explain the plot quickly of the second one?
Yeah, so the second one, again, okay, so I felt with the second one, we went more into the lore. So the second one was more into the mystery of Seraphia, and I felt like we were bridging the gap between the first one and the third one to get to the final stage of this mystery. So again, with them disturbing Seraphia's bones and getting those flashbacks, and then again also having the massacre on campus. So if the first one reminded us of Scream, the second one is very Friday the 13th, obviously,
Yeah,
stalk at camp, stalking horny teenagers. We got a bit more sex in this one. We got a bit more drug use in this one. We definitely leaned more into the R rating, I think, with 1978.
yeah,
So yeah, so I felt that 1978 expanded more on the part of the books, the part of the movie that was based on the Fear Street saga, because the Fear Street sagas are the books that tell the original curse of Fear Street and the
yeah.
feud between the Fears and the Goods, which of course becomes a big thing in the third one. And actually, I really
Yeah,
appreciated that in the first movie when they said the sheriff's name was Nick Good, I was like, oh, this is going to
okay.
come back because I remembered the Goods versus the
Very
Fears. So I was like, this is going to come into place. This is what I mean by if you've read the books, the movies are full of those little references for you to go,
yeah,
oh, this is going to lead somewhere. This is so, yeah. So I felt that 1978, with expanding on his character a bit, we got a little bit more hints about there was something to do with his family. He was talking about having to carry on family tradition. His brother was lecturing him, which obviously we got the reveal in the third movie. But I thought that one was very interesting that they
Did
were
you?
giving us
Sorry,
hints.
I might have
No, it's
missed it, but did you mention then you've got the only original survivor, Cindy? Did you mention
oh,
that part? Played
no.
by community actress Gillian Jacobs.
Oh, yes, of course. So at the end of the first one, they met her. And then I thought that was a great way to tie the two films together, to have a surviving character. from the first movie. And I don't know about you, and again, spoilers, guys, but did you figure out that it would end up being Sadie Sink's character instead of the sister?
No.
Or no? See, I when I watched before watching the first movie and the second movie, I watched the trailer for the second movie, and there was a shot in that trailer where you can clearly see her character about to get stabbed.
Okay.
So I spent the whole movie going,
Fair
she's going to die. But then I think about halfway through it, I was like, hang on, what if they like switch it up on us somehow and she's actually the one that survives? So I just spent the whole movie going, which one's actually going to die? Because I kept remembering that shot from the trailer and like being, well, at some point she's going to get stabbed. So
I'm with you really on this one. This was much better for me. I think the pacing was much better. You know, you spent a decent amount of time with the characters, getting to know them. Again, they're probably better characters in a way. I mean, they were solid, especially the lead ones. I like the two sisters.
I did too.
Obviously, I like Sadie Sink anyway, very natural. But also, I thought the young Cindy, I mean, it turned out it was the young Ziggy, but at the time we didn't know that. But I thought that actress was actually really good as well. And one thing I liked is that even though they played her off as initially like the more shallow, uptight one, they didn't go overboard with that. They still made her quite likable and grounded. And I quite liked how it was quite a relatable tension between her and Ziggy, and how, just the past with like losing a parent and stuff. You could understand both sides. You could understand why both would be like sort of pissed at the other, really. It was quite sort of, it wasn't too OTT with just making her the nasty sort of shallow girl sort of thing.
No, I agree. I think they did a really good job with showing the sisters and their trauma and why they were each reacting to it that way. And their dynamic of being clashing siblings, again, is very reminiscent of the books. There were many books where there were like siblings who would be polar opposites and would end up being brought together because they ended up going through all the traumatic shit on Fifth Street. So again, I felt like that was a nice little book shout out. And I thought the two sisters, I thought the actresses were really good. And like you, I really liked the characterization. I liked that you could feel sorry for both of them while also understanding why they were annoyed at each other. And I liked that they had their reconciliation, but oh my God, their death scene was intense.
Yeah, that was when it got pretty full on.
That was crazy. It's just, I think this film went, some of the kills in this film I found really unsettling. And I know they didn't show it, but the fact that they killed children in this film, like actual like kids died, like it wasn't just the horny teenagers who died, they killed some of the actual kids. I was like, wow, that's
very true. That's a fair point. I mean, actually, I thought the kills were the weakest part of the film.
Okay,
probably just because they were all the same, because it was literally him with an axe,
the one killer. I
think there was just the sense that I don't know, it was a weird sort, maybe similar to what we were saying about the first one, because a lot of times they would actually cut away from the shot as well. So I didn't know if they were trying not to overdo it, maybe till the end again, then they go really sort of graphic. But the kills maybe were the weakest part. But I mean, I enjoyed the characters, I enjoyed the story. It was very fun. Thought the use of music was better, probably because it evokes like nostalgia of being at a summer camp, and it just felt very natural having these, you know, like Bowie and these big like 70s rock artists, and it was entertaining. There was some fun dialogue. Maybe the line of the franchise is the shagadelic line, which did add me. So it's like one of the girls, isn't it? She's got a thing for like the camp leader, and she's like, but completely shagadelic. And it's funny because I just think of Austin Powers now with that.
Of course.
In a way, they're being quite clever because obviously the setting is before Austin Powers. You think of Austin Powers now with that line. So
I still felt like, even though it was set in the 70s, it still had a kind of 90s vibe, because the 90s had a lot of nostalgia for the 70s. There were a lot of movies that came out and TV shows that were set in the 70s and the 90s. I felt that this was kind of like that. It felt like a 90s a 70s movie being told through the lens of the 90s nostalgia. So it still like it worked well. So you have like references like that. That's like you can, and I think it tied into the first one very well with that sense. It didn't feel, because I was worried. I was like, you're moving from decade to decade. Is it going to feel cohesive? But I thought it did, and especially because they had the old characters interacting with the new characters, and tying it all together. So I thought that was really well done.
Yeah, this one I think may have been more my jam in the setting and the genre and probably the characters. I mean, I rolled my eyes a bit when I heard her name was Ziggy. I thought that was a bit on the nose.
It's a little on the nose.
Whereas the first film was very on the nose. I think this film wasn't as on the nose.
Yes,
So.
they dialed it back a little bit for this film, which was I think that is, from what I've seen online and the reviews I've watched and some people I've talked to, the second one definitely seemed more popular than the first one, because I think they did tone it down a little bit, so people weren't rolling their eyes as much with the kind of in-your-face references and the overt music references and stuff like that.
The pacing was better. It did feel like quite a natural pacing for like a slasher style movie, and so I did enjoy the second one.
They had more of a mystery element to the second one, because obviously this was uncovering more about Sarah Fear and trying to get to the bottom of the curse. And so I felt this was, a little bit more of a mystery, which again, some of the books were like that. It was like the terror would start and then the teens would go on like a quest to find out what was going on, and they'd talk to people or read things, and almost kind of Scooby-esque, like the Buffy's, in the standalone Monster episodes. So I really liked that. And the pacing was definitely better in this one, because I remember in the first one finding a few parts where I was like, starting to like cringe a bit, because I was like, okay, we need to move it along a bit here. We've got some cringy dialogue. We've got some bits that seem a bit insignificant. Like let's pick up the tempo. But this one, like right from the get-go, was, I don't know, I just loved it right from the get-go, and I found myself engrossed the whole time. And that I thought the final scene, the final kill scene in this one was so effective, with the two sisters and the way they didn't shy away from the violence of it. Like just Cindy getting that axe right to the chest over and over. That was just like, that was horrifying. I was like, whoa, okay. And it was also really sad, like, to see the sisters, die together. And I thought they really hit the emotional beats very well with that. So when you came back to the present, you could understand why Ziggy was still so traumatized by the events and, had to live her life by all the clocks and remember how to function because of that horror that happened to her.
I did actually have a question, just going back to, well, the first film in particular, actually, before we move on. But a film critic in this country, when he reviewed the first film, one of his complaints was he felt that the dialogue seemed like modern dialogue, and he thought that was a bit weird considering it was set in the 90s. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
No, I actually kind of get what he's saying. Like he's not wrong. I did feel that some of the dialogue was a little modern. I mean, I felt like when they were trying to do the 90s dialogue, it was a little forced. Okay. Like it could have been a little bit more natural. Josh was repeating the Konami code. It was like, oh, okay, that's okay. That's a little on the nose. But no, I do understand what he was saying. I think I do get it. And I do think whoever this reviewer was probably a bit right, because I did find myself cringing a bit at the dialogue in the first movie, because I felt it was a bit a little too modern. So I do agree, but I think it's hard to write dialogue of decades gone past, because you run the risk of falling into like really cheesy traps, and especially the 90s, it's like, well, what are you going to do, just have lots of people saying like radical and using food a lot?
I mean, I was probably have to rewatch it. It's not really something I noticed. I mean, I just sort of, in a way, I just think it's kind of nerd dialogue, and in a way, because they're doing a prestige, it's sort of similar to the way the characters spoke in Scream, except probably in Scream you would get particular 90s like lingo, but still they're talking in a way a bit more up than your natural sort of teenager would talk. So
definitely, but like I said, it's hard. I think it's hard to capture decades gone past. You don't want to feel too on the nose or feel like you're using outdated language, so you kind of have to.
It's very hard looking back. It's a balance. Okay, so yeah, we're both pretty positive on the second film. We would recommend it, and
Yes.
yeah, it definitely adds to what had come before it in the first film.
Mm.
So if you want to set up the third film and where they go in the third film.
All right. So the third film is obviously set in 1666, and this is the film that leans hardest into the Fear
Hmm.
Street saga. The story from it is almost lifted directly from the first book in the Fear Street saga, or at least an incident in that. It is altered, obviously. So I mentioned before that you have the Fears and the Goods and the feud between them. In the original Fear Street saga, in the very first book, the Fear family is this pious, righteous family. I'm pretty sure the father is the town preacher, and his son is in love with a good, and they don't think that she's good enough. Sorry, excuse the pun. And so they decide to
Very
keep
good.
not to keep the good girl away from the Fear boy. They decide to accuse the good girl and her mother of being witches, and they have them hanged. And then
Hmm.
the good family patriarch decides to swear revenge, and that's how the whole cycle of revenge between the goods and the fears starts. So in this movie, obviously, they've taken that concept and applied it to our characters. I really liked that they had kind of the call, like almost like it was past lives of Sam and Dina being Hannah and Sarah, and
Yeah.
showing how their love caused mass hysteria. It's almost like a modern commentary on the way we view LGBTQ community and what it would
Hmm.
have been like back then for them. And I thought that was really well done. If the first one, so we had the first one is very reminiscent of Scream. The second one's Friday the 13th. This one for me was like The Crucible, another great 90s,
Okay,
horror-esque
yeah,
film.
never thought of that,
So
but
so
I
yeah,
can
so
see
this
it.
one, have you seen The Crucible with Winona Ryder
No.
and Daniel Day-Lewis? Ah, okay. So again, it's similar to this. It's very much about mass
Hmm.
hysteria and what that kind of fear of the unknown will do to
Yeah.
you. These early settlements that had like lots of religious dogma and were very much anti-women being free and sexual and
Yeah.
just doing what they wanted. So I thought that was a really cool commentary. And so this one definitely reminded me of that. And mass hysteria is something that scares the crap out of me. Like it's
Yeah.
because it's
Well,
such a real concept. People just
and
they're
it's
on
still
mass
very modern.
panicking. Definitely, yeah. So
Yeah.
that whole thing, but I really did like the way they slowly revealed that Sarah Fear was not the bad guy. And I'm watching the film and I'm
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out where is this going to go, because obviously when the pastor got possessed, they talked in the first movie about how the pastor was the first one
Mm.
of her curse. But I was like, but hang on, he's gotten possessed and no one's done anything yet. So obviously something's going on here. Like she's either going to be revealed to be a bad guy the whole time or something else is at play. So when they revealed that it was in fact the goods, I thought that was a fantastic reveal. I thought that worked
Yeah.
really well. I thought that was a great callback to the books. And I think that worked so well because we finally got the origin of Sunnyvale versus Shadyside. Oh, I know you mentioned in your review that Sunnyvale tripped you up because it kept
Yeah,
reminding you of.
that bugged me. Yeah.
I get that. I'm guessing it was supposed to be a reference because Sunnyvale is not in the
Probably.
books.
Yeah.
In the books, that it doesn't exist. So they probably just popped that in
Okay.
and went,
Yeah.
yeah, we need a 90s
Very
reference.
90s. Yeah.
But yeah, so I actually really enjoyed the third one, but I did feel that the third one was very light on the horror. This one felt more like kind
Yeah.
of more like a drama, so which I don't mind, but it was I think they could have amped up the horror a little bit. Like I really loved the
Yeah.
scene where they found the pastor in the church with all the kids with their eyes gouged out. Again, that sounds weird, but as a horror fan, that was a spectacular scene. I thought that one was done really well, and I think we could have used more of that in this movie. They needed a few more scares. This one felt very light on the scares.
Sort of wondering if it was being ironic or if it was playing it more straight. And there were a couple of hints that it was at least pastiche in that sort of genre.
Yeah.
I mean, there was randomly a boner gag, which was sort of threw me off.
Yeah,
It's like,
that
oh,
was weird, wasn't it?
maybe they are going for a bit more humour, but up
Yeah.
till then, it did seem like they were playing it quite straight, and
Mm.
you obviously had quite a nice touch of pretty much all the returning cast, for this. Although, shame we didn't see more Sadie Sink. We
I
saw very
know she was a bit unused in this one. Yeah.
expecting Dina to sort of know that she was in Sarah Finn's body,
Yeah,
but she
to wake
obviously
up in the
didn't.
past. Yeah.
Yeah, like Quantum Leap sort of thing.
Yeah,
But no,
yeah.
they sort of played it as literally she was Sarah Finn and she didn't know about it, sort of thing.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah. Oh,
yeah, I just expected that, but I think, yeah, to sum up, this is definitely the middle film for me in terms of like quality. I'm more in this murky area with it. I think obviously it's a film of two halves because when they do get back to the present
yeah.
and you get the big, standoff and battle at the mall, which we'll talk a bit more about, but
Yeah.
uh, that does. There's still about an hour to go in the film at that point, so
Yeah.
it does
Mm.
feel like a movie of two halves, and
Definitely.
I would say I prefer the second half. Some of it might partly be a genre thing because in a way that genre maybe just especially if you're talking horror I'm not so keen on, and
Okay.
I think it just dragged a little bit. I mean, I appreciated some of the social commentary. I think that was clever. I think the way you can contrast this stuff in the past to the present, and obviously the cast were doing a pretty good job. I couldn't really complain, but yeah, just some of the dialogue I thought was a bit off, a bit sort of flat. I kind of with the Sutherland guy because obviously there was a twist with him when he turned out to be the one who did the deal with the devil essentially. I think he got better when that was revealed. Up to then, I
Yes.
kind of found him a bit boring as a character.
Yeah.
I will make and I didn't feel it in the second film, so that's credit to that. But then all three of these movies were close to 2 hours, which I thought maybe was pushing it. Um, Again, it's down to the pacing, so maybe the first film I felt the length more than the second film. I think in this film, because it is almost like split into two, then maybe the pacing was a bit off with that as well. Then maybe I did start to feel the length because I remember when we got to like the big like set piece at the mall, just looking at it, and there was still 30 minutes to go. And
Yeah.
even though I was enjoying a lot of that stuff because it was kind of like it's the climax and it's them coming full circle and it's them going all home alone in a way and being quite sort of active, which I did
Mm.
enjoy. Could cut out. There was a lot of fat in there. I think one thing I would like cut out was the stuff with Sam when she went after Dina, because
Yeah.
she was that just felt like another obstacle. I
Yeah.
think they could have just made it so that she was just like chained up somewhere, and then you kind of saw her at the end again with Dina. I think that was like one hurdle which wasn't really needed. It just felt like an extra hurdle thrown in there.
Mm.
Um, So I enjoyed a lot of the stuff in the back half of the film, but I felt the length a little bit probably because it
Yeah.
was two halves and maybe nearly 2 hours was maybe quite long for it.
No, I definitely understand what you're saying because, like, when they got to the end of the portion that was 1666 and they brought us
Yeah,
back to 1994, and I saw that we still had like 40 minutes left, I was like, what are
yeah,
they going to do for 40 minutes? That's a lot of time. Like, how are you going to fill that time? I thought that the final set piece was good. I thought it was
yeah.
inventive and I liked it. But I have to say, I didn't like that they randomly brought back that guy from that I can't even remember his name that Josh had
Uh,
randomly seen in jail. It was like I felt like they
right.
needed a third body for that scene because obviously three people could
Yeah,
not have pulled off the trap. So they were like, okay, we need a fourth body. Everyone else is dead. Who are we going to bring back? So they just had this kind of random guy. I would have preferred if they'd somehow figured out how to unpossess Sam and then she could have been there
right.
for the final battle because she was I liked Sam but she was such a passive character, like she didn't get to do much within the
Yeah,
story, and it could have been really satisfying to see her come out of the possession and get like her revenge, so to speak, to kind of stand up against
yeah,
everyone and have her there for the final battle as opposed to, like you said, just having her be this extra obstacle for
yeah.
Dina to overcome. Because yeah, this random dude whose name I can't even remember, Brandon, thief in the night. They just popped him in, and I'm like, we don't know this character. This character has
Yeah.
no stakes in this final battle, and when a character doesn't have stakes in the final battle, it's like, well, what are you even doing there? But I did like. There was a callback in the final battle that I thought, okay, that's actually kind of cool. It was very small, but when they were trapping the bad guys in the shops, the bookstore, the shutter door jammed, and I remembered that in the very first movie when Maya Hawke's character was trying to shut it, it jammed for her, and I was like, that is actually a very cool callback because it's something that we've already seen. So I always like things like that where they have one thing here and then they follow up with it. So I thought that was cool, but you're right, it definitely dragged for too long. It definitely went for too long, that final showdown.
But I agree about some of the nice callbacks and connective sort of stuff, because another thing I noticed is that this one sort of, you obviously, well, eventually you had her being hung, but the second one sort of started with like the bullies kind of hanging out from the tree. So I quite like that as like a visual sort of connection as well. So that was quite clever.
I remember in the first movie, in the opening scene, where they panned out and they showed Maya Hawke's character and the killer beneath the tree in the shopping mall, and I remember thinking that tree is going to come back. Obviously, they're showing us this tree for a reason, and I was like, I wonder what the significance of this tree is going to be. And then so the reveal that it was the actual tree that Sarah Fear was hanged from, that her bones are still beneath it. I thought that was very cool. I thought watching them all together kind of as one big movie and see what that does as an experience, because watching them as three individual movies, you're getting the story in three parts, and I thought the story telling it in reverse was very well done. I thought the decision to do that so that you kind of got little reveals here and there, so you started off thinking that you knew what was going on, like it was a witch and she cursed people, but then you'd get like little bits of information until you got that final reveal that her curse was actually that one day the truth would come out. And so I think to watch all three movies back to back could be very interesting to see how they work as a complete story, and maybe that might fix some of the pacing problems. I don't know, but I think to watch it as a whole, I think would be very interesting. But you mentioned that the genre of the third one's not your style. Well, period horror genre, I love period horror genre. I like movies like The Woman in Black or The Others, The Witch. I love slow burn horror and I love supernatural horror. So for me, it worked really well. But I do, like I mentioned, I do think they could have had more horror. This one very much seemed more like a drama. And I was like, which is fine. I mean, I like a good period drama, but that's not why I'm here. I'm here for horror. So, like I said, the scene with the pastor, that was one of my favorite scenes with the kids with their eyes gouged out. I thought that was so effective, but we could have used more of that in the 1666 setting because it's,
Yeah, you do actually bring me to a point, actually, because sometimes, and I would probably say that with that kill, I think I got the impression they were using CGI for the blood, and that bothered me a bit. I think it may be one of these where it's a Netflix movie, so there's a fair amount of money gone into it, and obviously a lot of times practical effects are better for horror.
Definitely.
And I will say that as a criticism. I think some of the CGI and stuff like that was overdone, and because I think there's a scene in the second film where there's like a snake or something.
Oh,
and I thought, that looks like a CGI snake, basically.
And it does. It takes you out of the experience. If you can do practical effects, then do them, because like you said, especially in horror, they just work so much better than CGI.
Yeah, but yeah, one thing I thought was cool, just talking about that mall scene, is I did like the way it cut between like the underground stuff and the overground stuff, because you had some really cool character moments for like Ziggy and for Josh, the brother's name, isn't it? And that they really came into their own as well, So I did like the contrast, like the overground and the underground. That was well done, and it's sort of wrapped it up quite sort of nicely with the character stuff at the end. So no, good conclusion. I also found, and I don't know if this was their intention, but when I saw the preview for the third one at the end of the second one, and they showed that they were going to have the current actors playing
the past characters. My first thought was past lives. And then I was wondering, because Sarah Fier curses Nick Good at the end, and she's like, eventually the truth will come out. And this is just a theory I have, but I'm wondering if through all the centuries, she has been trying to get the truth to come out, but she needed these particular people, because if you looked at their characterization in the past of all these characters, they were very similar to the characterization that we've seen in the present. You know, Ziggy and Cindy were obviously still antagonistic sisters, and Dina and Sam were still together. Even Kate was still kind of a drug dealer. She was going to get the berries from the widow. So I thought maybe they just needed these people reincarnated in order to break the curse. Like they needed these particular people at this particular time. And she's been trying to break it for years, but just hasn't found the right people. And so she finally got this group of people again back together at the same time in the same place, and through that the curse was finally broken. But again, that's just kind of my theory, but I thought that, you know, could be an interesting slant on why the curse has been going for so many years and how it managed to break exactly when it did, because there was a juxtaposition of Sam and Dina fighting in the first film with the Sunnyvalers versus the Shadysiders fighting above them, and I thought that was probably a reference to the romance in the past. So I don't know. And again, I have to watch all three movies together, but it could be interesting, or it could just be that I'm just making stuff up because I want to read too much into things.
Well, that's the fun of these things. You know, you can bring your own read into them. But I do, although I'm not quite as high on these movies as you, I think I do agree about their appeal as a trilogy, and maybe watching them again, you know, all in one and back to back. And I think certainly as a trilogy, I think it works pretty well. I think it's a fun little trilogy, obviously different feel to each one for the most part. And I think, you're definitely right. There's a lot of connected stuff going on, which I think makes it quite a nice little trilogy. And I think I can imagine just rewatching these and it, apart from maybe the length and pacing at times, but it being quite an easy sort of watch, you know, quite a good little time as a trilogy. And obviously for you as a fan of the book, it seems it seems to have satisfied you. So
it definitely did. It was really great. As a fan of the books, it really felt, especially the second and the third films, really felt like they were the series kind of come to life on screen, which is always fun, you know, when you have a good adaptation of something that you loved, especially something from childhood, which you have a lot of nostalgia for. It's definitely fun. So I think it's interesting that as a fan, I have liked them more, because I'm wondering if maybe I like them a bit more just because I'm seeing them through nostalgia, which is always such a powerful thing, versus a fan who doesn't, who can maybe see the movie through a little bit more of a practical lens, you know, without the rose-tinted glasses of nostalgia clouding the views. So I think overall as a trilogy, I'd probably give it about 7 out of 10. Like, I think it was solid. I didn't think it was mind-blowingly fantastic, you know. It didn't really try to be like push the envelope, but I thought for what it was, which was just a fun slasher trilogy made by people who I think really loved the source material and loved the genre, because I felt that a lot watching the films. I felt like they had been made by people who really loved what they were doing, and that's always a great feeling when you're watching a film or a TV show, to feel that whoever made it like has real passion for it. I felt that with this trilogy. I was like, I think this has been made with a lot of love and a lot of nostalgia, and that for me was really great. So I'd give it overall 7 out of 10. Yeah. What about you?
I agree. I would actually go with that. That's what I was thinking. I think you do have to judge it as a trilogy. There's definitely ups and downs, but I think the second one I really enjoyed, and then there was enough good things in the third one to at least make it solid. And so I am, and obviously I didn't totally dislike the first one. So I think overall 7 out of 10 as a trilogy probably feels about right. And do we agree the second film's the best of the three?
Oh, definitely, yes. If I were to rank them, I'd probably rank number 2 first, and then I would say the other two are probably on par. So I think the third one and the first one about the same in terms of of how good they were and how much I enjoyed them. But the second one was definitely the best installment. I think you really can't go wrong with a summer camp setting, and I love anything set in the 70s. I have a real 70s fetish, so anything set in the 70s, I'm good for.
Yeah, there's some good music in the second one, wasn't there? I mean, apart
Oh
from the
yeah.
soundtrack, but the actual like music, the score,
The score, apparently whoever did the score also worked on the Scream score,
Yeah,
which
it's the same guy.
yeah, because in
I
the
see
first
his name a
movie,
lot on films.
yeah, because there
Yeah.
were a few pieces of like the score in the first movie that I was like, oh, that sounds like the Scream music because I love the score for Scream. So when we get around to the Scream movies, we'll definitely
We'll
talk about
talk
that.
about that.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so because there were a couple of pieces I was like, this is very reminiscent of Scream, and I really liked that. Again, it felt like they were paying homage to it as opposed to ripping it off. It felt like they very lovingly wanted to show we loved this movie back when, and this is kind of our tribute to it. So I really liked that.
Okay, that's great stuff. I think we're done. We've done a
Mhm.
pretty good, solid review of those
Yeah,
films. So I think certainly differ on some points, but I think we both recommend you at least checking them out. And
definitely.
fans of the books should be happy by the sounds of
Hmm.
it. So do check
Most
it out.
definitely.
All three films are on Netflix now, and yeah, so that's Fear Street Trilogy, and we are going to be looking at franchises and trilogies, many of the big hitters, including Halloween coming up. But actually, Rachel, if you want to tell the viewers what's coming up next week, what we'll be
Terrific. Yes, so next week we are going to be reviewing the three Conjuring films. We will not be doing all the spin offs, we'll be leaving those for a later time. So we will be doing The Conjuring 1, 2, and The Conjuring The Devil Made Me Do It. So we'll be looking into that trilogy. And again, it will be similar to this. We'll give our opinions, we'll give our thoughts on the scare factor, on the kills, and give it an overall rating. And I think with that one, we'll probably rate them as individual films because they weren't obviously released as a trilogy. But for
Yeah,
any Conjuring fans,
makes
that is
sense.
what you're in for next week. So it should be a good ride.
Yeah, look out for it next time, next same time, well, roughly the same time next week. So if you want to catch up with the Conjuring films during the week and look forward to our review next week, Rachel, do you want to promote your channel because you've got a channel?
Thank you. So yes, guys, as always, if you want to follow my channel, I'm just Rachel McDonald. Keith will probably leave a link down in the description.
Yeah.
Video essays, not so I don't get in front of the camera, but you'll see lots of video essays on there. I have already 2 video essays on Fear Street, and I will be doing one on the third film, so you can hear some more of my thoughts there. But yes, definitely follow me over there for more content, and follow Keith too, because we'll be doing lots more reviews, and he does lots of individual reviews, which are great too. So follow everyone.
Yeah, follow this channel, like and subscribe. You can also get me up on Twitter. I'll put that link in the description. Also, get me up on Letterbox if anyone's on Letterbox. Bookhouse Boy 1980, I think, on there. I tend to forget, but nice little Twin Peaks reference. But that's who I am on Letterbox if you want to follow me. So yeah, do let us know your thoughts in the comments below, what you thought of the trilogy if you've seen them, and look forward to our review of the Conjuring films next week. So thanks for listening. Like and subscribe. I'll see you guys again soon. Goodbye.
Bye, guys.